I still remember the sound of my heart before the crash. It wasn't loud. It was just there, steady and stubborn thudding against my ribs like it knew something I didn't. The air outside was thick with rain and tension, the kind of storm that doesn't just fall from the sky but seems to rise from the ground too. The windshield wipers squeaked with every swipe. My fingers were clenched around the steering wheel. I told myself it was fine, that everything would be fine, but my gut had already screamed otherwise. I was behind the wheel of my parents' old minivan. It smelled like fabric softener and faded ambition. I had just finished my evening shift at the bakery and was racing across town to pick up my younger sister Chloe. She had a hair trial appointment for her prom. Our mother had called me twice already that afternoon. "Don't be late. Chloe can't afford to be late. I didn't even get a how was work or a how are you holding up. Just strict orders." I told myself it was no big deal. Just another errand, another favor, another moment where my needs didn't matter because Chloe was the shining one, the important one. But something about that night felt different. The sky was angry. My bones were tight. The tires slid once just slightly as I turned onto the highway. My breath caught, and then, in one blinding second, the world exploded. My name is Lana. I was 20 when this happened, though most days I felt older, like life had aged me from the inside out. I grew up in a house where silence spoke louder than praise, and usefulness was more valued than love. My parents ran a modest wedding planning business. At least that's how they described it to others. To me, it was a machine, and I was one of its cogs. From the age of 15, I was doing invoices, carrying flower buckets, steaming bridal gowns, cleaning up venues after midnight. No pay, of course. "This is your future," my mother used to say, like I should be thankful. But the future was never mine. It was always Chloe's. Chloe was 17. Beautiful in the way people paused for. Long blonde hair, perfect skin, a voice that turned soft when adults were nearby. She got straight A's, danced competitively, and won every school award you could put on a shelf. My parents said she was destined for greatness. They said I should be more supportive. That being the older sibling meant stepping back so she could shine. I used to believe them, used to think that being invisible was a kind of virtue, but it chipped away at me. Every compliment Chloe got was a reminder of what I wasn't. She had a room with fairy lights and matching curtains. I had the guest room with a leaky window and a twin bed. She got driving lessons and a new phone. I got hand-me-downs and gas money when they remembered. Even my college fund had quietly disappeared when Chloe's dance fees went up. I dropped out after one semester and started working full-time at a bakery to help support the household. My father said I was being dramatic when I cried about it. My mother told me I was ungrateful. I stopped asking for anything. I cooked, cleaned, and when I wasn't at the bakery, I was helping with wedding setups, driving Chloe to fittings, or folding brochures at the office. There was no room for me in our family equation. I was the margin note, the footnote, the afterthought. I tried not to resent Chloe. It wasn't her fault, at least not at first, but the older she got, the more she leaned into the pedestal. She started talking down to me, correcting my posture, laughing when I mispronounced fancy words at events. I once heard her call me the help when introducing me to her prom committee. My mother didn't correct her. She just smiled. That was the dynamic, the hierarchy. Chloe at the top, my parents as her agents, me as the assistant, the filler, the unpaid intern of our family unit. So when they told me to pick her up that night for her prom hair trial, I didn't argue. I was tired, sore, my feet hurt from standing all day. But I nodded and said, of course, because that's what I always did. The rain had picked up by the time I reached Chloe's dance studio. She walked out with a hoodie pulled over her head and a grimace on her face like the rain was personally offending her. She got into the car without a word, slammed the door, and immediately started scrolling through her phone. I asked if she was ready for the hair trial. She didn't answer, just mumbled something about not wanting to look like last year's prom queen. I kept driving. The traffic lights reflected off the soaked pavement like broken glass. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I knew the route to the salon by heart. 10 minutes straight down the main road, one left turn, and we'd be there. But the storm made everything harder. Headlights blurred, wipers couldn't keep up, the tires skidded once just a little. I eased off the gas. Chloe looked up finally and said, "Are you sure you should be driving in this?" I wanted to scream. "No, I shouldn't be. I should be in bed. I should be at college. I should be anywhere but here." "But I just said we're almost there." She rolled her eyes and went back to texting. That's when it happened. The flash of white, the screech, a shape cutting across the intersection. My foot slammed the brake. The car hydroplaned. I couldn't stop it. We spun once, twice. Chloe screamed. Then came the sound that haunts me in my sleep, the sound of metal folding into itself. My side hit first. The driver's door buckled. The airbag exploded. My arm whipped forward and then back. Pain lit up my spine. The world dimmed and then went silent. When I opened my eyes, it took me a moment to understand I was still alive. The windshield was cracked like spider webs. Rain was coming in sideways. My chest burned. The seatbelt had cut into my collarbone. I tried to move my left leg, but nothing happened. My arm felt wrong, like it didn't belong to me. I turned my head and saw Chloe, her face pale, clutching her phone. She had a scratch on her cheek that was all. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't bleeding, but she was crying like the world had ended. I tried to reach my phone. It had been thrown somewhere beneath the seat. I couldn't reach it. I called her name. "Chloe, help me find my phone." She didn't move. She just whispered, "You broke the car." That's what mattered to her. Not my leg, not my blood. Just the car. I tried again. "Chloe, please." "My leg. I think it's broken." She looked at me like I was being difficult, like I was ruining her evening. Then she opened her door and stepped out into the rain. I was still trapped, still bleeding, still alone. That's when the headlights appeared. A familiar SUV pulled up behind us. For a moment, a wild hope bloomed in my chest. Maybe now they'll help me. Maybe now it matters. My parents stepped out. My mother rushed toward Chloe, arms outstretched. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Did she hurt you?" Chloe collapsed into her arms. I tried to call out, "Mom, over here." My mother didn't look. My father walked over, glanced at the damage, and shook his head. "You really wrecked it this time," I whimpered. "Dad, please. I can't feel my leg." He stared at me, eyes flat. "You're fine. Just bleeding." And then he turned to Chloe and said, "We're going to be late. Get in the car." Chloe hesitated, looked back at me once, and then got into the SUV. My mother followed, murmuring, "We can't miss this appointment. They charge a fee if you're more than 10 minutes late." I was still pinned, still shaking, still in pain. They left. They actually left. I lay there stunned. For a full minute I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe. The red taillights of their SUV blurred through the rain, a pair of eyes retreating into the darkness. They didn't turn back. Not once. I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe they would circle back, realize what they'd done. But no. The only thing that circled was the sound of Chloe's voice in my head, accusing me of ruining her night. My chest heaved, my arm throbbed, my mouth tasted like metal and fear. I pressed against the door, tried to force it open with my good leg, but the frame was crushed inward. My shoulder screamed when I moved it. I wasn't just hurt. I was broken. And no one was coming. I remember sobbing, not just from pain, but from something deeper. A kind of ache that had nothing to do with bones and blood. It was the realization that I was disposable, that in my parents' calculation a hair appointment meant more than my life. I heard cars passing by in the distance, but no one stopped. The storm was too loud. I felt the chill settle into my bones, like the night itself had turned its back on me. I didn't know how long I lay there. 5 minutes, 20, an hour. At some point, I stopped crying. I started planning. I reached down and undid the seatbelt with my good hand. Every movement was a scream. I twisted my body sideways, dragging myself across the crushed center console. My jeans were soaked and sticky with blood. My fingers curled around the passenger door handle. It gave way after the third try. The door swung open just enough for me to fall out. I hit the wet pavement with a grunt, crawled forward inch by inch until I reached the shoulder of the road. That's where I stayed, facing the mud, breath ragged until headlights cut through the darkness again. A van pulled over. The door opened. A woman's voice called out, shaky and urgent. "Are you okay?" "Oh my God. Are you okay?" I tried to nod. My lips barely moved. She ran toward me, knelt beside me, her umbrella forgotten on the ground. She pulled out her phone and called 911. She stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, held my hand, kept saying, "You're going to be all right." She was the only human being who saw me as human that night. At the hospital, everything blurred. Bright lights, faces masked in blue, pain like knives and drills. They sedated me while they set my leg. It was fractured in 2 places. My shoulder was dislocated. My ribs were bruised, one of them nearly punctured my lung. I spent 6 hours in the emergency room. Not one call, not one message. My parents didn't show up. Not that night, not the next day. The nurse asked me if I had emergency contacts. I gave her their names anyway. She called, left voicemails. No one came. On the 3rd day, the billing department asked for a guardian's signature. Only then did they arrive. My mother walked in holding a lavender latte and a to-do list. She barely looked at me. "You're going to have to cover this. You know we're not rich." My father stood in the corner with his arms crossed. "Next time, drive safer." Chloe posted a selfie that night from the salon captioned, "Hair trial survived, kind of." The comments poured in. "OMG Queen. Hope your sister's okay. But at least you look fab." I stared at it on my phone, hands shaking, heart silent. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream. I just watched. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not like bone, but like belief. I stopped being their daughter. I started becoming something else entirely. The woman who found me that night visited me once in the hospital a week later. Her name was Sheila. Mid-50s, short hair, sharp eyes, soft voice. She told me she had driven that same road every Thursday for years and never stopped before, but something had told her to look right just once. I didn't know what to say, so I just cried. She held my hand for 10 quiet minutes and then left without fanfare. No one else came. My parents didn't stay long after signing the paperwork. My mother mentioned she had a client meeting. My father said he had calls. Chloe didn't visit at all. When I was transferred to a rehab center for long-term recovery, I was still in a wheelchair, shoulder in a sling. I had hoped that maybe this would change something. Maybe the trauma would open their eyes. It didn't. The only calls I got were from the billing office. My room at home, I later learned from a nurse who followed Chloe on TikTok, had been converted into a closet space. Chloe did a house tour online and joked about how she needed more room for her gowns. My bed was gone. My desk had a ring light sitting on it. My clothes were in boxes in the garage. I watched the video from my rehab bed, mouth dry, heart hollow. No one cared. No one missed me. I was just gone. A week before I was scheduled to leave the center, I overheard a conversation between 2 nurses. One of them mentioned my name. The other said, "Isn't she the girl whose parents tried to cash her life insurance while she was in the ICU?" I froze. I waited until they left and then asked my caseworker. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it's true. They had taken out a small policy when I turned 18. Nothing huge, just a $50,000 term plan. But after the crash, they had contacted the insurance company to inquire about it. The company had refused to process it because I was still alive and being treated. I sat there in that sterile room and tried to process what that meant. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had prepared for me to die. And when I didn't, I became inconvenient. Something that didn't go according to plan. That was the moment my recovery changed. It wasn't just about healing my body. It became about reclaiming my life. I stopped crying. I started asking questions. I learned everything I could about insurance law, about legal emancipation, about survivor rights. When I was discharged, I didn't go home. I found a room to rent from an old music teacher who didn't ask questions. I got a job at a community mental health center answering phones. I worked nights. I saved everything. I enrolled in online college and studied psychology. I watched lectures with one hand while icing the other. I didn't go on dates. I didn't make friends. I built something. Quietly. Brick by brick. Every dollar was a step. Every class was a weapon. Every scar was a reminder. By the time I turned 23, I had pieced together the entire timeline of what happened after the crash. I got a copy of the insurance inquiry filed by my parents. It was dated the morning after the accident. Less than 12 hours after I was wheeled into emergency surgery, sedated, hooked up to IVs, my mother had called the insurance provider and asked how to start a death claim. The form was printed. She had filled out everything except the signature line. My father had scanned it to PDF. It was never submitted, but it had been prepared. That fact sat with me like a cold weight. They had not rushed to the hospital. They had rushed to a payout. I printed that document. I put it in a folder with screenshots of Chloe's social media posts, the hospital discharge papers, the 911 transcript from Sheila's call, the photo of my destroyed room turned into storage. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew it mattered. I knew I would need it. In the meantime, I kept moving. I graduated from my online college program. I got certified in trauma counseling. I started working with survivors of abuse and neglect, mostly teens who had aged out of foster care or had been abandoned. I saw pieces of myself in all of them. Their stories were sharp mirrors, but I didn't tell them mine. Not yet. Not until I was ready. My parents barely acknowledged my existence. Occasionally, I got a forwarded email about a family gathering or a wedding setup they needed help with. Chloe sent me a birthday text once, just a line. "Hope you're still not mad." That was all. I didn't respond. I focused on my goal. I had a quiet dream, one I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to own something. I wanted to hold the deed to a place that couldn't be taken from me. A place where I could create healing, not pain. And then the opportunity came. A former investor in my parents' wedding planning business had fallen ill. He was selling off his shares. Through a silent agreement, I bought them. Legally, anonymously. Over the course of 6 months, I acquired a majority stake. My name wasn't visible yet, but I held the power. I watched from a distance as they bragged about upcoming expansions, new marketing campaigns, Chloe's growing social media brand tied to the business. They had no idea who now sat behind the curtain. They didn't recognize the ghost they had raised. When I finally walked back into their world, I did it without warning. No threats, no announcements. Just a clipboard, a contract, and a quiet smile. It was spring, the peak season for weddings, and my parents were preparing for the biggest promotional event of the year. A grand wedding showcase at one of their most prestigious venues featuring top-tier vendors, bridal fashion runways, influencer meet and greets, and dozens of pre-booked couples looking for planners. They called it their crown jewel. My mother had even managed to get a small feature in the local lifestyle magazine. Chloe was set to host the event, turning it into a soft launch of her new personal brand. I let them talk about it for weeks online. I let the RSVPs pour in. I even helped design the promotional materials anonymously through a freelance platform. Then, the night before the event, I arrived at the venue. The receptionist was already briefed. She handed me the master keys. I walked through the hall past the golden drapes and floral archways and into the main office. I took down every poster, every printed seating plan, every vendor tag. I replaced them with one notice. Bold letters: "Event canceled, ownership transferred. For details, contact L. Rivers." The same initials I now signed my clinical work under. They knew that name. Not because I told them, but because they had seen it before in fine print on a document they never bothered to read. Lana Rivers. I stood in the center of the hall and waited. At exactly 9 a.m., the front doors burst open. My mother entered, first clipboard in hand, already barking instructions. Chloe was behind her, balancing a tray of iced coffees and a designer bag. My father followed, phone pressed to his ear. They all stopped when they saw me. My mother's face went pale. Chloe dropped her drink. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "This property is no longer under your management. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal items." My mother stepped forward, eyes wide. "This is our company. We built this." I held out the ownership transfer documents. "Not anymore. I bought the controlling shares. Quietly, legally, fully." Chloe looked at me like I had betrayed her. You're trying to ruin us. I shook my head. I'm just reclaiming what I was never given. My father tried to argue, his voice rising. I handed him a letter from my attorney. It included a trespassing clause. My mother's face crumpled. You're not our daughter anymore. I smiled. I never really was I? They left in silence. No screaming, no final insults, just the echo of their own collapse following them out the door. The vendors never arrived. The clients canceled. The brand they had spent years building cracked in one weekend, and I didn't post about it. I didn't go online and blast the story. I didn't need to. Some storms don't make noise. They just arrive. Precisely. Powerfully. Silently. After the fallout, they tried to spin the story. My parents told everyone that I had gone rogue, that I was mentally unstable, that the transfer of ownership was some kind of fraud. Chloe posted an old photo of us together with a caption dripping in passive aggression. Some people just never let go of childhood grudges. Her followers rallied behind her, at first. But then I opened the folder, the one I had built over years. I didn't name names. I didn't post faces. I just published facts. A blog entry, titled simply "The Night I Was Left." It included anonymized medical records timeline screenshots, a redacted version of the insurance inquiry, and a transcript of the 911 call made by the woman who saved me. I shared it in a private online support group for survivors of family trauma. Within 2 days, it went viral. The comments came from everywhere. Who would leave their daughter bleeding to make a hair appointment? Who cashes in a policy while their child is still alive? Who calls that love? People recognized the story even without the names. Some locals connected the dots. Slowly, their world started to shrink. Vendors pulled away. Clients backed out. A news outlet contacted me for an anonymous interview. I didn't say yes. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Their reputation cracked. Their influence dried up. No one came to their defense. Not really. Because deep down, people knew. They just needed permission to see it clearly. Once their business dissolved, I purchased the building outright. It was a strange feeling standing inside the very walls that once echoed with my mother's orders and my father's criticism. I walked from room to room, touching surfaces they used to claim as their empire. The chandeliers they bought on discount, the desks I had scrubbed clean for wedding meetings, the coat rack where Chloe once hung her glittery jackets. It all belonged to me now. But I didn't want a wedding business. I didn't want to sell dreams wrapped in flowers and fake promises. I wanted something real, something that could not be faked or polished. I began renovations. Quiet ones at first. I replaced the velvet chairs with soft, earth-toned sofas. I removed the giant gold-framed mirror and replaced it with a hand-painted mural done by a local teen artist. I knocked down the wall to create a group space. I installed bookshelves, tea stations, journals, fidget tools, weighted blankets. It became something new. A trauma recovery center for teens and young adults who had survived emotional neglect and toxic family systems. I called it the Resilience Room. No press release, no party, just an open door on a Monday morning with a wooden sign and a simple message. You are not invisible here. Word spread slowly at first. A counselor referred a girl who had been kicked out by her stepmother. A teacher mentioned us to a boy who had nowhere to go after graduation. Within months, we were full. I didn't sit in an office far away. I was there, in the rooms, on the floors, in the stories. Every face that walked in reminded me of the girl I used to be. And every time they cried or laughed or sat in silence, I let them. Because silence, too, is part of healing. On opening day, I gave a short speech. Just a few words. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't call out names. I said I once bled in a car while the people I loved chose to be somewhere else. Today, I hold the keys to that very place, and I'm unlocking the door for you. There were tears, from teens, from volunteers, even from Sheila, who stood in the back, her arms folded, a proud smile on her face. I didn't cry that day. I felt something deeper than tears. I felt peace, not the kind that comes from revenge, the kind that comes from reclamation, from taking what was broken and choosing to build again, stronger, softer, wiser. For every child still waiting on the side of that road, I built something that would never leave them behind. A few months after the center opened, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Chloe. The envelope was pink-scented, sealed with one of her trademark glitter stickers. Inside was a single folded page. The letter was short, no apology, no acknowledgement, just a question. How does it feel to ruin your own family? I sat with it for a while. I read it again and again, trying to find some hidden meaning, some crack where empathy might slip through. But it was hollow, defensive, accusing. The words of someone still playing a role, still clinging to a version of the story where she was the star and I was the villain. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. My life was no longer built on their narratives. I had my own, and it was louder than their silence had ever been. Sometimes people asked if I ever regretted it. The confrontation, the exposure, the severing. I told them no, because I didn't destroy a family. I escaped one. A structure where love was conditional, where value was transactional, where loyalty was demanded but never given. I escaped, and then I built something better with the pieces they left behind. I think about the girl in that crushed minivan sometimes, the one who couldn't move her leg, who whispered for help and got indifference in return. She still lives in me, but now she's not alone. She's surrounded by people who see her, who hear her, who believe her. I don't need closure from my parents. I don't need them to say sorry or to understand. That's not the point of healing. Healing is not a courtroom, it's a garden. You grow in the dirt they left you in. You water yourself with tears they didn't care about. You bloom anyway. The Resilience Room now has a wait list. We've added evening sessions and satellite programs. Teens from other states write in. Some fly in just to sit in that quiet room and feel seen for the first time. And I sit with them. I tell them I don't know your story, but I know what it's like to be erased. And I know what it means to come back from that. Stronger, softer, clearer. Sometimes Chloe still posts online. Sometimes my parents try to stage a comeback, but their audience is smaller now. Their voices echo, but they no longer land. Because I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I'm living it. And that's louder than any shout. If you're reading this and you've ever felt like the forgotten one, like the errand girl, the silent helper, the child who was never enough, I want you to hear me now. You are not broken. You are not invisible, and you are not alone. Not anymore.